Okay guys, so welcome back. So today we're going to look at making some selections in Photoshop and working with images and the image menu. So first off, in Photoshop, sorry, we have our selection tools here, and basically these tools help us identify which part of the image we want to highlight and I guess manipulate or mess around with. So for example, first things first is that whenever we are interfering or manipulated any photograph or image, the best practice is to duplicate the base layer that you're working with. So to duplicate, you just click and drag into the new layer icon and you get background copy. Now that way, anything that we do to this layer, in case we mess up, we could always delete it and start over, right? And that way we always have the original copy here, right? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take out the visibility of the background, original background layer, and we're going to work with the background copy. So having done that first, we can now get into making selections. So to make a selection, first off, Photoshop has given us rectangular marquee and elliptical marquee. I'm just going to demonstrate how selections work with these tools, and then we're going to go on to the quick selection and magic wand tool. So the elliptical marquee, basically it's an elliptical tool, and if you hold shift, obviously you'll get a circle. Now we can move around this by clicking and dragging. Now sometimes this could be a problem, because in the case of let's say let's undo this. In the situation where I want to expand this the selection itself, and by the way, you could tell it's a selection by the marching hands or the vibrating edges. So if I go to scale this, you realize that the selection itself is scaled, and that's not what we want, right? So to deselect this selection, we go to the select menu and hit deselect or Control D on the keyboard, Command D on the Mac. So again, I'm going to do the elliptical tool again. Let's go to rectangular, the rectangular marquee, click and select. Now the rectangular marquee, as you can see here, we can move it around, but this isn't common with all the Photoshop versions. This is any newer version. So in the event that we want to scale this and resize this selection here, right, we could go to select, transform selection, and we get the corner points and these little anchor points, and we could scale it or rotate it and do whatever we want with it, right? So here now, what this means is that you're telling Photoshop that within this selection here, within this area here, within these marching hands or vibrating dotted lines, this is the area we are interested in. So for example, if I were to take the paintbrush and paint with let's say blue, and yes, I could be inside, but the minute I go outside the box, nothing happens. That is because the selection is active, and basically we are telling Photoshop that we are not really interested in anything else other than what is selected here. So I'm going to select deselect just to show you what that looks like, and obviously it looks horrible, and now we could go and just delete it, because you know we could undo but also delete probably faster, and duplicate the background copy again, and that way we could work from scratch again. So now we are seeing that we have a rectangular marquee or elliptical marquee, indicating that this is the area. So the area that we really want to highlight is really to extract the mountain from the background, from the sky. Now what we need to do is find a tool that will help us just select this area here, and Photoshop has a lot of tools that could help us do that, and one of them is the magic wand tool or quick selection tool. So I'm gonna go to the quick selection tool. I'll probably touch on the object selection a little bit, because that one is the easiest of all, and it's not found in the earlier versions of Photoshop. So as at the top here, you could see selection, add to selection or subtract from selection. I'll explain that as we go along. So if we click here and drag, you could see that it clicked and dragged, but it also made a fair selection. But in this bit here, it really wasn't what we wanted. We actually wanted this piece of mountain selected, but because of the pixels are so close together, if you notice the color here and here similar, Photoshop didn't detect it like that, so that became a problem. So select, deselect. Let's switch to the Magic Wand tool. Now the Magic Wand tool is on, this is basically the same thing: add to selection, subtract from selection, intersect. So if I go to add to selection and I click and drag, it's on 10. Let me move that up to 30. I think by default it's 30. Right. So let's work with the selection first. All right. So making a selection. If you notice, it makes a new selection every time. All right. So this is the new selection. This is the new selection. All right. New selection. New selection. New selection. Let's add to selection. So if we want to add to the selection, this bit is already selected, and we can add to it by just clicking here. And you can see that these two are select these two areas, 1, 2. So this middle area we should try and select all the areas in the sky that we want to extract. Right now we came across the same problem. Now we can fix this now by first off subtracting from selection, because this is already in the selection. If we subtract from selection this part here, it takes away this whole area here. So again, that's not what we want, but we'll still subtract from selection these areas here that you see, these little highlighted areas. But let's go in and add to selection. This time we're going to bring the tolerance down to about 15. And when you bring the tolerance down to 15 now, we could get a nicer selection here. You can see that now. So now what, whoa, edit, undo. So what we did here was make a nice selection of the mountain. If we zoom in, we could see that there are some areas here that has been left out. Let's see if we can get rid of those by subtracting from selection. Right, subtract, subtract, subtract. Right, subtract, subtract. Yeah, so we could zoom in, but that looks about alright for now for what we want to achieve. Right, so we could zoom in and you can see here that there are edit, undo. There are areas here that are selected, tiny little blocks, so you have to be careful. And this actually isn't, in my opinion, the perfect tool to do this. So what we want to do is get a better tool to actually extract if we want to really get into the details of the mountain, and we'll do that in another tutorial. But for this tutorial, we are just exploring the Magic Wand and the quick selection tool. So now we have the selection going, right? We can now hit backspace on the keyboard or delete on the Mac, and it will remove the sky for us, because that is the area that we have just highlighted. Now that is a very destructive way of making compositions. So in that, I mean destructive is that we deleted it, we can't do anything about it, we can't get it back for some reason if we want to do that later on. So if you could look in the layers panel here, you could see that the background is gone and there's a checkered box here. So let's undo this, undo clear, and with it selected now, we can now click a mask, add layer mask. So if we were to add the layer mask, you notice now that we have here that the black area and the white area in the mask, and the black area is basically invisible and the white area is visible. This is not what we want, because we said before we want to get the mountains and not the sky, so we actually wanted the opposite. So I'm going to edit, undo again, and this time I'm going into the select menu, and instead of saying select, deselect, I'm going to try and select the mountain. I'm just going to select inverse, and if I click that, basically the selection from here switches to the mountain, so whatever was not selected previously would be selected now. And now we could go ahead, let's just add to the selection here. See that little, right. Okay. So we're gonna add the selection here, and that's add layer mask, and this time the background is removed and the sky is removed, and now we have here our mountain area. So what we could go on to do now is add another layer just to show you. So let's add a text layer, Helvetica bold. Let's choose a color from the mountain here. Yeah, and we could choose, we could write mountain. Let's do the blue in all caps. And obviously we could scrub it up to increase the size. Yeah, about there. Move it again. Right, now we want the word mountain actually behind the mountain, so that could easily be fixed by the layer ordering. So just going to click the layer ordering and drag it below this layer. Now we have mountain here. And let's try and add a different background to this area here. So we could go new, click add new layer, or go to layer, new layer, and we're gonna call this one sky color. And now we're just gonna take the paint bucket tool, and that is found under the eraser tool, and we're just gonna fill the foreground with a color. Let's look at something neutral. Let's try something like this. And now we've filled the whole area with this color. Now to fix this, again, we just have to click and drag straight underneath every other layer, and now we have a blue behind this color. Now we can always change this color here by just simply doing a color overlay, but we can leave it for now just to show you the difference. Now we could also bring back the original image by deselecting our layer that we knew that says sky layer and adding back the background, and what that does is that it adds the original image behind it, and now we have the mountain layer on top of that image, and now on top of that mountain text we have the actual cutout of the mountain. So let me show you what that looks like, so you probably understand what I'm saying. See, so now we have this cutout here on top of this mountain, so it looks like you know, the mountain is actually the word mountain is behind the image itself, like how it was from the beginning, right? So this is what we have originally. Let's take it out, and we added this layer which you're not seeing, and now we add the word mountain and turn back on the background layer. And that is how we manipulate layers and make selections just to easily cut off our text. Now we could even go further. Let's turn on this layer and start to mess with the colors of the image itself. And one way of doing that is by using the image menu. And if we go into image menu, we could go to image adjustments, and we can look at brightness and contrast, and increase the brightness and decrease the contrast, and get this kind of blowout effect of the image, right? Or we go to image adjustments, and we can go to hue and saturation. This would change the actual tones of the photograph, So hue and saturation, we could just mess with the hue and pull it around, and that way add more reds, add more saturation, sorry, or decrease the saturation, make it black and white altogether. Or we could just mess with the reds and say increase all the reds, so all the red pixels in the image would be increased or highly saturated. Or we could say, you know what, all the red pixels, we want to change them to a kind of purple or green, or and so on. And we could do that with yellows, and we could change all the greens. Let's change the blues to a yellow. Yeah, increase like that. So now we could have this blowout effect that we want, right? Or we could go to image adjustments and photo filter and kind of warm up the whole tone of the image itself. That way you get a more natural effect. So we could go to a warming filter or even a cooling filter and make it look like it's actually cooler than it is, but the warming filter looks better. And we could also use little block colors itself, or we could actually choose a custom color by clicking color and double clicking onto the color picker and choosing it from our slider here. Right, so we can get one to match the background there and try and blend in with the background, which would look so monotone, right? And that is how we could change the tones of the photograph. We could go to vibrance, and vibrance will actually make it pop a little more, right? So we can increase the saturation and then the vibrance of the image, but not too much to make it blow out. And we can leave it like that and hit OK. And now the mountain is a little more prominent. And if we add the background layer, let's remove it, let's see the background layer before, and now we could see the difference with the images. Let's take off this one, right? A little more pink tones coming out in the image itself, right? And basically the image menu adjusts all the tones, the pixels, the saturation, lightness and brightness of the photograph that we have here in front of us. So you could explore further in the image adjustments and go into the levels, curves, exposure. When we started to talk about photography and adjusting portraits and stuff, we'll go into levels and curves and exposure a little further, right? But for now, just know that to quickly adjust an image, it's found in image adjustments, and basically any one of these. For example, desaturate would make it totally black and white, right? So now you have that contrasting background, that is the sky, and then you have a black and white image on top of that, a black and white mountain. Edit, undo, desaturate. So this is a very, again, destructive method. There's a non-destructive way of doing this, but we'll move on to that again when we start to discuss adjustment layers. So thank you for listening and watching this video. I'll see you in the next one.